All right, Janelle, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. We are super excited to have you on today. And Janelle, like we do with everybody, we start this podcast with the most important question of all. Because our audience, this is middle, high school students and teachers. These are busy individuals. They don't have time for fluff. So Janelle Hinds, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no on that one?
I love pineapple on pizza. It's a Canadian pizza. Like, you have to represent yes to pineapple on pizza.
Fantastic answer. You've won our listeners over from the start. I didn't know that either. It was a guest that we've had on this podcast who told us that the Hawaiian pizza was invented in Chatham, Ontario.
Yeah, so I have to love it. And it's this perfect balance of sweet and salty from the cheese. So yes.
I can't explain any better than that. So Janelle Hinds, now that we're a fan of yours, tell us a bit more about who you are and what you're doing for work right now.
Yes, so I feel like I'm one of those people that when people are like, what's your field or what's the one thing you do? I'm like, I do multiple. So I would describe myself as entrepreneur. First and foremost, I am the founder of Helping Hands. We're a youth-led organization focused on helping young people navigate the system and kind of build skills for their future career, or even discover fields that they don't know exist. But I'm also a public speaker, so I've spoken to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I've spoken in front of 10,000 people at a big rally. Yeah. But I also do a lot of public speaking for schools and companies like Microsoft and Google. So kind of all over the place. And I also do consulting for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
So just a few hats.
Just a few.
Yeah. Has public speaking always been something? Because I mean, I've had an opportunity to work with a number of entrepreneurs over the years, and everybody's a little bit different, but it's not always something that they're born with. But just because of the nature of entrepreneurship and having to do all these pitch competitions and always present your idea, they learn and they become more comfortable. Just like anything, it's practice. Was that public speaking with you as well, or you just always loved being in front of a crowd?
It's really funny you brought this up. Anyone that knows me from high school knows I was terrified. I actually passed the valedictorian because I was terrified of public speaking. I actually had a stutter. And a lot of people, if you attend the Helping Hands workshop, I actually tell you the story of how I turned from that nervous, hated public speaking into this confident person that has spoken to actually 2 different prime ministers. And a lot of it was because of my volunteering experience. I started kind of being put in positions where I was practicing my communication skills and kind of figuring out what I personally needed to do to improve my communication skills. So yeah, public speaking was not something that I ever thought I would ever do.
Wow, no kidding. And it was a volunteer experience that kind of lit the flame and gave you the opportunity to get that initial experience?
Yes. So, I think when you're a lot of times in high school, you kind of only have a couple of little circles you're in. You're with your friends, you're in school, you're with your family. And I think it didn't really push me to kind of figure out how best to communicate. Your friends kind of start understanding who you are as a person. If you use slang, your friends understand that. But I was kind of volunteering different positions where sometimes I was helping people get directions. Sometimes it was, having to explain things to people. I was doing like free volunteer tutoring, and that all taught me different ways to communicate and with different types of audiences. And that has really helped with my public speaking. And you're right, as an entrepreneur, I did pitch competitions. And I remember my first one being really, really nervous. I won. And I was like, oh, maybe I could do this. Yeah, I think I have the skills to do this. So it's really helped since then.
I can't recommend volunteering enough. I know it's a cliche thing to say, but it just allows you to get those reps in, to get the experience that you might not otherwise, and look at the doors that it can possibly open up for you, right? So is that what led to you wanting to start Helping Hands, or can you tell us about that story?
Yes. So in Ontario, students have to do 40 hours of community service or volunteering. Right. I noticed a lot of my peers were struggling to kind of find meaningful volunteer positions. So not just like, I'm going to go and stack some chairs, but stuff where they were really learning skills or discovering, careers they wanted. I kind of heard the stories of people saying, I knew somebody that, went into nursing and then realized how much she hated it, but had never got to experience what working in healthcare was. Yeah. It was kind of a combination of noticing that I could build skills through volunteering, noticing that volunteering is a great way to discover your field. And even when I was 15, I got a job that everybody else was like in their 20s and already graduated from university. And everyone's like, how did this 15-year-old get this amazing job? Yeah. It was purely based on my volunteer experiences. So I
Wow.
kind of took all of these little aspects and was like, you know what, I'm going to start an organization that helps other young people discover potential careers and also how to build their skills up.
Cool. So let's talk more about that. I mean, as a young person, and whether I'm required to do my 40 hours or I just want to volunteer, where do I start to look? Like, does it matter? Do I try to find something that's in line with what I'm interested in and with my purpose? Or there's a lot of students who are looking for opportunities just to pad the resume and put their name next to an association. Like, what do you tell young people that are looking for a volunteer opportunity?
It should
What?
really, I think it's kind of the first one. It should really be about, working for a field that you're passionate for. I mean, that is what Helping Hands does. So feel free, you can contact us at Helping Hands app on Instagram, and we will actually sit down with you and we will do the work to help you navigate and find somewhere to volunteer. But I kind of tell people, yeah, like figure out a career. If there's something you're like, hey, I'm thinking about, I would like to go into medicine, or I care about the environment. When you go and volunteer, it won't feel like work. You'll enjoy what you're doing. So really, I would say it's looking at field. And sometimes we're like, I don't have anything I'm passionate about. So we'll kind of ask you some questions and kind of help you realize that, yeah, you really do have passions. If you watch a lot of lawyer shows, maybe you're really interested in law. So we'll kind of help you navigate and kind of think about some of your hobbies and how that can tie into something that you're passionate about.
Awesome. And remind me, Helping Hands, is it Ontario only right now, or?
So while physically we're located most of the team is located in Ontario, we actually have volunteers across Canada.
Amazing. Okay, so if I'm a student listening to this, obviously you can help me find volunteering opportunities, or at least point me in the right direction of where to look. But what do you want students to know listening to this? Because it's more than just volunteering at this point.
Yeah, so I think it's also about early career exploration.
Hmm.
And, it's also building your own confidence. We have a lot of people that like, oh, I'm not sure I can do that. And, I'll have conversations, sit down with them and kind of talk about like, why do you feel this way? And a lot of people come out and they're like, now this volunteering has helped me get a job, or this volunteering, I have written multiple reference letters for people that are now in law school or people who've gone into med school, and their volunteering really helps them. So I would say it's a lot about building your own skill set and also discovering, because there was a lot of things I think when I was in high school, I did not realize were jobs. Like I didn't know urban planning was a thing. I take public transit. I have a lot of feelings about public transit. If I had known urban planning was a thing, I might have gone into that. So I think it's also kind of exploring and even using things like my blueprint to help you kind of figure out what different fields exist and what potential volunteer opportunities exist in those fields.
I had the same experience in high school. You don't know what you don't know, right? And you talked about your friend who, through the experiential opportunity for nursing, figured out if it was right or not right for them. I had the very same opportunity. My undergrad, I thought I was going to go to law school, but I did get that experiential opportunity and actually figured out it wasn't for me. So I wish, there was in my blueprint when I was in high school, I wish there was a Helping Hands just to get you outside of that bubble that you also talked about before, right?
Sure. And that is the most common thing, especially people in university tell us, is they're like, I wish I had Helping Hands when I was in high school.
Yeah. Oh, if it were up to me, if I had a magic wand, I could make anything mandatory in the curriculum. Every student would have to have an experiential, either workplace or volunteer placement every year. Just get them out and trying new things, figuring out what they do and they don't like, because again, you don't know.
Sure. And that's something that I actually have kind of pre-COVID was going to the Ministry of Education in Ontario to try to advocate to say, like, we need more experiential education baked into the curriculum.
Yeah. It's moving that way, but obviously never fast enough for what we would like to see, right?
Okay.
So Janelle, now we know what keeps you busy, all the many different hats you're wearing from, let's call it 9 to 5. What do you like to do outside of that when you take the hat off? Like, what's a personal time thing that Janelle likes?
I love to bake.
Nice.
So hence why pineapple on pizza, I have feelings about. And so, and I always tell people it's really important to have that thing outside of work that you do. And a lot of times I'm watching Netflix. Like, I'll be honest, I'm just like, I'm going to relax. I'm going to throw on some Netflix and definitely binge more than I should.
Any recent documentaries you want to recommend or anything we should check out?
I was watching Unwell, which was just very interesting to kind of talk about the healthcare industry. So that's definitely a very interesting documentary.
Yeah. Okay. Unwell. Now you mentioned Helping Hands has an Instagram. Do you personally have Instagram, Janelle?
Yes. So it's Janelle_Hinds_. I wish I could have gotten a better one, but
it's okay. Yeah, we'll put the link to the actual handle in the show notes for people so they can just click on it. I have mixed feelings about Instagram. Obviously, I love it. I still have an account, but I took it off my phone. I had to because I found myself not being able to use it properly, right? I was spending a lot of time on there. I was wasting a lot of time on Instagram. My biggest issue with it is that it can often become a highlight reel for people where they're showcasing their best of, and it makes their world look perfect. And you're always comparing against that. So I usually like to use this question as a segue for you to talk about maybe a failure, the opposite of that highlight reel that you've experienced, whether in your personal life or through Helping Hands, that you think would be important for the young people listening to this to hear about.
For sure. And I definitely think Instagram definitely just shows you all the positives and people don't realize, like even talking about my baking, I tried making, I remember my brother a graduation cake. It was horrible. It fell apart. And I actually posted that picture to be like, because people always are like, Janelle's a great baker. And I'm like, there's times my baking does not turn out well at all.
Yeah.
But in the work life, I would just say the thing I realized is that I kind of had some bad skills that, you had in high school and elementary school, and they kind of continued into adulthood. So I would procrastinate. I was definitely not always good at being like, let me do my assignments on time.
Right.
As well as I was always afraid to ask teacher questions. And I realized that continued because a big part of Helping Hands, we're a nonprofit and a social enterprise. And as a nonprofit, we go for grants. So you have to do these kind of like scholarship, kind of looks like a scholarship application.
Right.
I wouldn't ask questions. So sometimes I was actually answering the question wrong and not getting the grants. So it took me a little bit to realize, like, stop trying to do these applications last minute and ask questions. And now I've been able to raise over $500,000 in funds by kind of switching and getting out of that really bad habit. So one thing I would say is, if you notice you have these little bad habits in high school, try your best, because once you get out of it, you'll kind of continue with those bad skills.
It's harder to change habits the longer it has become a habit, right? And I can't agree with you more about asking smart questions. It's a skill that I don't think we're methodically taught at any level of education. If you're unclear about anything, ask the question, right? There's nothing bad that will come out of asking the question. There's really no such thing as a dumb question, because if you don't ask the question and you think it's something else, then you're going to be wrong. So why not ask it early?
I find when someone asks a question, somebody else around you has the exact same question. So I loved the people in university that would ask the professors questions, because I was way too nervous to do it. And I really, really regret it.
Yeah. So if you could change it back to high school, just be that person raising their hand. Who cares what other people think? I want to know the right answer to this question. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So Janelle, you've obviously helped hire people and find employment for people through Helping Hands, right? Here's a hypothetical question for you, and it's one I love to ask. So let's say you get two applicants that are going for the same job. There's one position, and they both have almost identical resumes on paper. What's that one, core competency, that 21st century skill that you look for, that you found over the years is going to help separate a really good candidate from somebody else?
That is a good one. And that is not a hypothetical situation. I was in that situation earlier this week. We have two candidates, amazing educational and experience, pretty even on paper. So it really came down for us during the interview process. I really look for people who are passionate. So I can tell, for Helping Hands, so we actually do hire people. I have a staff right now of 5 people, plus co-op students on top of that. And what I really look for is, that passion. So are they passionate about helping other young people? And also listening skills. So I can tell during the interview, are you listening to the questions that are being asked of you? Are you able to reflect on your own experience? And that confidence in your answers helps you stand out. And, for us, we do a hiring panel. So at least 2 people listen to interviews. So that way it's not just one person's opinion. And most of the times we're on the same page, and we'll notice, like, yes, this person's really confident, or this person's very passionate.
It's really easy to tell if someone's listening or not, right? Because they're actually responding to your question. They're not thinking in their head about the next thing to say, right? So that's huge. We've talked about active listening in the interview, but you also talked about showing passion. If I'm a young person applying for this job, how do I actually show passion that I care about helping other people? What do I do during the interview to show you that I really do care?
I think talk about your experiences. And, I would say, even it doesn't matter what field you're in. When you're going for interview, Google the company. It's so easy to quickly Google them, find a little bit about them that's maybe not on the very first part of their website. And when you show that, I went through the effort to spend, even if it's 5 minutes, finding out more about the company, it really helps stand out in an interview. So anyone who's like, hey, I spent time on the Helping Hands website, which doesn't, we don't have a complicated website, they always stand out to me.
Yeah. We've talked about that a lot on this podcast, that you want to show the hiring manager that you actually want to be here, that you didn't just hit send to 100 different job openings, that you're intentionally applying for this job because it aligns with your purpose and your passion, right? Everything you just talked
No, I
about.
think it is definitely difficult when people are applying for jobs. I've definitely been the person that's applying to 1,000,001 places, but especially when you get to the interview process, spend that time to do the research.
That's a good point. Okay, so again, we talked about asking questions, how you wish maybe you had learned that skill in high school. Same thing with procrastination. What's a different life skill that you weren't taught in high school that maybe you wish you were?
So for me, and it was something that I spent time advocating before in an earlier life, was financial literacy. I think when you're older, understanding the impact of debit versus credit, I'm getting to a point I would love to buy a house and now trying to figure out what a mortgage is.
Right.
I think there's all these little things that when you're already 18, you already need to start building credit for so many future opportunities, and like school does not teach that. However, in Ontario, a bunch of young people, we were advocating, and we actually did get the government to put in financial literacy. I mean, even when I was in high school, I actually started a club without knowing anything about financial literacy to teach my peers financial literacy.
Yeah, that was awesome to see. I remember it was a group of young people, and I saw the article there at like City Hall in Toronto or wherever the Ministry of Education was. And now there is some more financial literacy embedded into that GLC 20 course, right? Which is really cool. Yeah. So there's still definitely ways we can go, but it's an amazing start. So Janelle, let's talk. This is a segment we like to call strong opinions loosely held. The way I like to define this is it's something that you believe really strongly in, but you're open-minded enough to receive new information as it becomes available, and maybe it changes your mind, right? But mine, the one I like to strongly believe in, is that I believe grades and tests, they actually do more harm than they do good. Do you have something, Janelle, that you believe strongly in that you want to share with the audience?
I would say it's about kind of my management style. I very much, when co-ops or employees come on my team, I'm very much like, you get to take charge. I try to sometimes, I say throw people kind of in with a shark. So they'll be like, how do you do this? I'm like, try to figure it out first, and then I'll answer it. And, sometimes it works out. Usually my co-op students, when they leave, they're like, thank you so much, for your learning style. You're kind of the first person I've ever had that has taken such an interest in like my learning. But I'm also very open to being like, hey, Janelle, what you're doing doesn't work for me. So I always tell, my staff and co-op students and interns when they start, let me know if what I'm doing doesn't work for you. And I think it's really helped because I've been able to, for some people, what I'm doing isn't working at the beginning, so I adapt it to work for them.
I love that. I'm a big believer in that. I don't know the right word for it. Maybe it's problem solving, or maybe it's just the skill of being able to figure it out, right? But you learn by doing, right? So yeah, it's scary to get thrown in the fire, but what's the worst that's going to happen, right?
I'll tell them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm happy you do that. We need more of that, because there's a lot of times where students, especially going through K through 12, you're in class from a certain time, you're given instructions, you're being told what to do. It's not all that often that we're told to think outside of the box and go outside of that rubric, right? But,
and I mean, I guess a part of that is I always say I wish school sometimes was okay with failure, because we're so, I think, especially I find as Canadians, because I have looked at different, ways across the world and different cultures look at failure. And I think Canadians are very against failure, but you will fail at little things in life. And I think if I had learned how to fail and feel okay, be okay with like failing and coming back from it, things would have happened so much better in my life. So I wish we learned to fail.
That's one of my big issues with tests and grades, right? Because the way we look at failure in the education system, if you fail a test at the start of the year, you're going to have to like get hundreds on the next test if you want to really bring your mark back up, right? But in the real world, you learn by failing, right? You're not necessarily penalized for that failure. You get to reflect on it. I mean, that's not true. Maybe you are penalized for that failure, but you learn from it and you're able to try again. So it is something that I agree with you with, that failure could be looked at a little bit differently in the education system.
Exactly.
Okay, Janelle, let's do some rapid fires for you. IQ, so intelligent quotient, or EQ, emotional quotient. You can only pick one. Which one is it?
I think EQ, in my role, empathy and the ability to listen to people is so crucial.
I think that's every role in the world, right? Empathy is that, for me anyways, it's the #1 skill you can develop, right? Do you have a favorite class in high school growing up?
Ooh, I think for me, it was a lot of my science classes. So I realized I did not mention it, but I'm actually biomedical and electrical engineering through my education. And I really love questions. And I think that kind of goes along with listening, like kind of thinking and problem solving. So I think science class was kind of the favorite for me and built some of those problem solving skills.
That's super cool. I didn't know that. What do you do these days to keep up with any of that? Is there a show
So
or?
a lot of my actual STEM advocacy and public speaking is actually in the STEM field. So I teach coding classes on weekends. So I still kind of really involved in the STEM world, even though it might not be, I'm not, an engineer by title right now.
Yeah, that's so cool. All right. You have a billboard. Everyone's going to see it. You can write one thing on that billboard. What does it say?
Ooh, I think I would say you're enough. I feel like, I've had a lot of people kind of, throughout life, judge or underestimate me. Underestimate is a word I love to use, especially as a Black woman. People, sometimes I walk into rooms and especially I'm very young for, a nonprofit founder. So I'll walk into rooms, everyone else is on the older side. And people never assume that like I'm running an organization and I have full-time staff. So I would say you're enough, that like you're good enough for what you are.
Yep, it's an amazing and important message. I bet it's a great feeling though, when you do walk in the room, you can see the eyes on you, and then you get to introduce yourself as the founder of the nonprofit. And
it does feel good when I can see in their face, they're like, "Oops, I underestimated this girl." It definitely kind of feels good inside.
Yeah, don't underestimate Janelle Hinds, right?
Yes.
So Janelle, what's a book that you've read now in your adult life that has had such an impact on you that maybe you wish you'd read before you turned 18?
Actually, and I think it kind of goes along with what I just said. So there's a book called The Memo by Minda Harts, which is about, women of color specifically taking their place in the workplace. And I've had some horrible experiences in the past where, I was told you're not allowed to speak during meetings, even when things were going wrong. And I'm like, oh my God, please, can I say something? So, it kind of talks about that, building that confidence and feeling like you're enough. So it's something that I've even passed on to my whole team. And at one point we kind of did like a book club with that book. So that's definitely one that I recommend. And I think for everyone, it's just books about confidence. I think that's just, again, failure and confidence is something that we need to build more.
I love that. We're going to link to it in the notes, but what was the name of the book again?
It's called The Memo. I think it's called The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Take Their Place at the Table. I wish I remember. It's a long title.
Yeah. No. Okay. We'll link to that. That's a super important one. So last question for you, Janelle. It's again, a hypothetical scenario. You're the superintendent of a school board and you're tasked with deciding one skill. So one 21st century skill, one competency that every student needs to display evidence of in their digital portfolio in order to graduate. What is that one skill?
Ooh, I think empathy. I think I really have to go back that. The ability to listen, especially as Canadians, we live in such a diverse culture. I'm from Mississauga, so it's the city right next to Toronto, super diverse. And as a kid growing up, having friends from so many different cultures, learned about the cultures, but also struggles that people are facing, and really listening to my friends talk about their experiences. And it's definitely helped me in my world. And now I actually am a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, helping companies improve their thing. And a lot of the times I'm being like, you need to teach your employees empathy because you're having people who are in their 40s, 50s, and they don't know how to empathize and listen to their coworkers. So definitely, I think empathy would be the biggest one. Yep. And I know it's a difficult one to like kind of figure out, how do you build it, because it is a little bit of EQ, but I think it's really about practicing your listening skills. So sometimes not talking and just listening to someone talk about their story. And like, a good practice skill to do is like, someone's telling your story, do not interject. Like spend 2 minutes where you say absolutely nothing other than listening to what they're saying.
That's an amazing way to start. I mean, that is the core of it, right? Just listen to the other person and get to understand in their shoes kind of how they actually feel and what's important to them, right?
And I'll say it is actually harder than you said. The first time I was at something where they did this, where they're like, you have to listen to someone tell a story and you're not allowed to talk. I was just like, but I have a question. You realize how hard it is to do it. So definitely practice. Like it's just a good thing to practice with your friends.
It's like anything though. It's building a muscle, right? It's repetition. Okay, Janelle, take us home. Again, if I'm a student or a teacher listening to this, where can I go to find out about Helping Hands and what should I do once I get there?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, helpinghandsapp.com, on Instagram at helpinghandsapp, or on Twitter at helpinghands. Personally, you can find me at Janelle_Hinds_ on Instagram.
Janelle, this was awesome. I learned a lot. I know the students and the teachers listening to this will too. So thank you so much for your time, and keep up the amazing work. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to, helping anybody that reaches out to us. And thank you for inviting me.